So the theme for today is one power, one by one. And possibly we are one. I was looking at a couple things that I'd like to share with you today as far as the power of one and the power of community. And they'll be through the news and through history. And then there will be some reflections on some different sacred texts and some children's texts, not necessarily in that order. So thank you for coming here today. The good and the not so good, the power of one. The power of one vote. In 1776, it was one vote that gave the United States the English language instead of German. In 1875, it was one vote that changed France from a monarchy to a republic. By one vote, the territories of California, Oregon, Texas, and Washington state became states. And without those single one votes, our flag would only have 46 stars. In 1876, one vote declared Rutherford B. Hayes to be the 19th president of the United States. And in 1923, it was one vote that gave Adolf Hitler leadership of the Nazi Party. One vote, for good or for bad. Rutherford B. Hayes was the 19th president. The 19th Amendment was definitely around this year for the 50th anniversary, right? That's the one about women's rights. And here's the story. It all had to do with one vote. August 18th, 1920, Nashville, Tennessee. Harry Byrne, a 24-year-old representative from East Tennessee, was the youngest member of the state legislature. He has a red rose on his lapel. The red rose signifies his opposition to the proposed 19th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, which stated, "The right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or any state according to sex." As 35 states had ratified the measure already, bringing it to one vote short of the required 36. And Tennessee, the 19th Amendment had sailed through the Senate, but stalled in the House of Representatives. Thousands of both pro and anti-suffragist activists descended on Nashville, Tennessee. If Byrne and his colleagues voted for the 19th Amendment, it would pass the final hurdle on its way to adoption. There were weeks of intense lobbying and debate within the Tennessee legislature, and a motion to table the amendment was defeated by a 48-48 tie. The speaker called the measure to a ratification vote, and to the dismay of many of the suffragettes who had packed into the Capitol with their yellow roses, sashes, signs, it seemed uncertain that the final roll call would maintain, it seemed certain that the final roll call would maintain the stall. But that morning, Harry Byrne, the youngest representative, with his red rose saying no to the 19th, received a note from his mother, Phoebe Ensminger Byrne. She was known to her family as friends as Miss Feb. In that note, Miss Feb had written, "Hurrah! Vote for suffrage! Don't keep them in doubt. I noticed some of the speeches against, and they were very bitter. I've been watching to see how you stood, but I haven't noticed anything yet." She ended the letter with a rousing endorsement of the great suffragette leader, Carrie Chapman Cull, and implored her son to be a good boy. Help Mrs. Cat put the rat in ratification. Still sporting his red boutonniere, but clutching his mother's letter, Harry Byrne said aye so quickly that it took his fellow legislators a few moments to register his response. With his single syllable, he extended the vote to the women of America. He ended 52 years, over half a century of tireless campaigning by generations of suffragettes. Harry Byrne invoked the fury of his red rose carrying peers while presumably avoiding the fury of his mother, which may very well have been the more daunting of the two. The next day, Byrne defended his last-minute reversal. In a speech to the assembly, he made no secret of his mother's influence and her crucial role in the story of women's rights in the United States. "I know that my mother's advice is always safest for her boy to follow. And my mother wanted me to vote for ratification. for the first time, he publicly expressed his personal views, his personal support of universal suffrage, and declared, "I believe we have a moral and legal right to ratify." One vote by a man influenced by his mother. So some other examples of one thing happening that affected history. We'll skip to this one. During war, I'm sure you've heard a lot of stories of people, of one person saving a battalion, changing the history for a lot of people. And here's one that I'd like to share with you. It was World War II, March 1945, in Speyer, Germany. When the tank on which he was riding received heavy bazooka and small arms fire, Sergeant Edward Carter voluntarily attempted to lead a three-man group across an open field. Within a short time, 2 of his men were killed and the third seriously wounded. Continuing on alone, Carter was wounded 5 times and finally forced to take cover. 8 enemy riflemen attempted to capture him. Sergeant Carter killed 6 of them and captured the remaining 2, then crossed the field using the 2 as his shield. He obtained valuable information concerning the disposition of enemy troops from these 2 men. Edward Carter died in 1963. He was buried in his hometown of Los Angeles. But over 30 years later, in January of 1997, he received the Medal of Honor. This is the highest honor you can get in the military. His body was exhumed and reinterred with full military honors in Arlington National Cemetery. Sergeant Edward Carter was one of 7 African-American soldiers from World War II who received the Medal of Honor. So, one power. One more story. You probably know this one. I'm going to try to pop up the slide and share my screen. Possibly, we will see. And hopefully you will see what I want you to see and not everything else. Thank you for your patience. Start where you are, use what you have, do what you can. It will be enough. So can you see the picture of the starfish? Okay. There's a story about a starfish by Lauren Isley. Once on ancient Earth, there was a human boy walking along a beach. There had just been a storm and a starfish had been scattered all along the sands. The boy knew the starfish would die, so he began to fling them into the sea. Every time he threw a starfish, another would wash ashore. An old Earthman happened along and saw what the child was doing and called out, "Boy, what are you doing?" "Saving the starfish." "But your attempts are useless, child. Every time you save one, another one returns, and sometimes it's the same one. You can't save them all. Why bother trying? What does it matter anyway?" The boy thought about this for a while, a starfish in his hand. "Well, it matters to this one." He flung the starfish into the welcoming sea. It's been said that the 2 most important days of your life are the day that you are born and the day, not that you die, but the day that you find out why. Why was I born? What is my purpose? Do I have a superpower that's meant to change the world? Gonna go back to one of my favorite stories. Do you guys know who this is? This is Horton. And the story of Horton, Here's a Who, by Theodore Geisel, also known as Dr. Seuss. And that big pink pile behind him and the pink thing he's holding in his trunk all has to do with a dust speck. And Horton, with his great big ears, hears something coming from this dust speck. But he's the only one who can hear it. And he's talking to this dust speck, and everyone thinks he is crazy. You've probably heard the story. Well, he runs into a lot of trouble. Some of the other animals in the jungle and in the story want to destroy his dust speck and the land of the Who's in Whoville. He does everything he possibly can to save that dust speck. One of the things that they do is there's a whole big, huge field of those pink flowers that look exactly like the one that he has. And some of the birds steal his flower and throw it in this field. Horton has the perseverance, some might call it stupidity, to go find the Who's in Whoville on his dust speck, on his flower. Just like the starfish being flung back into the sea, he knew it would make a difference to those people, those Who's. So fast forward towards the end of the story, and what's happening is he has convinced the Who's that they have to be heard. They have to use all their voices. And if they could convince the rest of these crazy animals that are trying to boil that dust speck, boil that dust speck, boil that dust speck. If he could convince them that they're real, that they are alive, that maybe, just maybe, it could save their whole world. So there he is, he's all tied up, and they're trying to take the dust speck and drop it into the boiling water. And he's saying to the people in Whoville, you have to make noise. You all have to work together. You have to make noise. Let your voices be heard. So the mayor is running around, and everybody is making tons and tons and tons of noise. And just as he felt he was getting nowhere and almost about to give up in despair, he suddenly burst through a door. And that mayor discovered one shirker, quite hidden away in the Fairfax apartment, apartment 12J, a very, very small shirker named Jojo was standing, just standing, and bouncing a yo-yo. Not making a sound, not a yip, not a chirp, and the mayor rushed inside and he grabbed that young twerp. And he climbed with the lad up the Eiffel Tower berg. This, cried the mayor, is your town's darkest hour. The time for all Who's who have blood that is red to come to the aid of their country, he said. We've got to make noise in greater amounts, so open your mouth, lad, for every voice counts. Thus he spoke as he climbed when they got to the top, and the lad cleared his throat and he shouted out, Yop! And that yop, that one small extra yop, put it over. Finally, at last, from that speck on that clover, their voices were heard. They rang out clear and clean, and the elephant smiled. Do you see what I mean? They've proved they are persons no matter how small, and their whole world was saved by the smallest of all. How true, yes, how true, said the big kangaroo. And from now on, you know what I'm planning to do. From now on, I'm going to protect them with you. And the young kangaroo in her pouch said, me too. From sun in the summer, from rain when it's fallish, I'm going to protect them, no matter how smallish. This story to me speaks of the power of one, obviously Jojo, who was doing his yo-yo, and his power to say yop, which opened the ears of everyone. Now, for me, sometimes it's like, you know what? Everyone was doing their thing. Maybe it wasn't the power of just Jojo, right? Everyone was doing their thing. And once Jojo did his thing, then every voice could be heard. Sometimes it's not such a happy story, the changes that we get from our powers. George Floyd, one person, one story. All the ears and the hearts and the eyes have been opened. So I'm going to move on to some stories from the wonderful holy texts that we have to refer to. I know a lot of people are Christian. I'll have a Christian one. I'll have a Jewish Old Testament one. And I also have a Buddhist one from Thich Nhat Hanh. From the Old Testament, the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. You've probably heard of it, but you might not have heard of the part leading up to it. You know, the pillar of salt and Lot looking back and all that stuff. So here's the story from Genesis 18:18. The men, who were angels actually, turned away and went toward Sodom. Abraham remained standing before the Lord, and Abraham approached God and said, "Will you sweep away the righteous with the wicked? What if there are just 50 people in that city? Will you sweep it away and not spare the place for the sake of 50 righteous, good people? Far be it from you to do such a thing, to kill the righteous with the wicked, treating the righteous and the wicked alike. Far be it from you. Will not the judge of the earth do what is right?" And God said, "If I find 50 righteous people in the city, I will spare the whole place for their sake." Then Abraham spoke up again, "And now I've been so bold as to speak to the Lord, though I'm not nothing but dust and ashes. And what if the number of the righteous is just 5 less than 50? Those 5. If I find 45 there," God said, "I will not destroy it." Once again, Abraham spoke. "What if only 40 are found there? To say 40, I will not do it," said God. Abraham said, "May the Lord not be angry, but let me speak. What if only 30 righteous people found?" God answered, "I will not do it if I find 30. Abraham said, "What about the sake of 20? For the sake of 20 righteous, I will not destroy the city." And Abraham said, "May the Lord not be angry, but let me speak once more. What if only 10 righteous people, only 10 people can be found in the entire city?" And God answered, "For the sake of the 10, I will not destroy it." From the New Testament, it's the story of Jesus. Now, we all know the story of Jesus, and he had a lot of superpowers, right? He could heal people. He could raise the dead. He could turn water into wine, one of my favorites. He could, so many things. But this is a story where he specifically speaks about power. From Luke chapter 8. When Jesus returned, a crowd welcomed him, for they were all expecting him. And then a man named Jairus, the ruler of the synagogue, came and fell at Jesus' feet, pleading with him to come to his house because of his only daughter, a girl of 12, was dying. On the way there, with the crowds all around him, almost crushing him, there was a woman who had been subject to bleeding for 12 years. No one could heal her. The woman came up behind Jesus and touched the edge of his cloak. And immediately her bleeding stopped. Jesus stopped. "Who touched me?" he said. Everyone denied touching Jesus, the crowd that almost crushed him. And Peter said, "Master, the people are crowding and pressing against you. A lot of people have touched you," in other words. And Jesus said, "No. Someone touched me. I know that power has gone out from me." The woman, seeing that she could not go unnoticed, came trembling and fell at Jesus' feet. In the presence of all the people, she told why she had purposely touched his cloak and how she had been instantly healed. And Jesus said, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace." So what is power? This is into the part where I did some more reading and research. And of course, there's lots of definitions of power. And one of the books I came across was by Thich Nhat Hanh, who's a Buddhist who actually kind of brought Buddhism to Western culture, especially here in the United States. He has a book called The Art of Power. And in it, he writes about 5 different powers. Actually, I'm going to unmute you and raise your hand and see if you can help us name the 5 powers that Thich Nhat Hanh is talking about. And these are powers that all of us know. What do you think of when you think of power? Raise your hand. And Neil could maybe unmute you. If you know somebody powerful, what do they have?
Wisdom.
Wisdom. Okay. What else? Bring it on. The blank and powerful.
How about compassion?
Oh, you guys are in church. I love your superpowers. Pardon?
Persuasion.
Persuasion. That's a good one. Fame, definitely. How about, have you heard the expression, the rich and powerful?
Say money.
Yeah. If you have money, you have power, right? So he talks about the 5 powers that most of us here in the United States think of is money, fame or influence, sex. Sex is a very, very powerful tool. Fancy food. If you've got a lot of fancy food, it's something that you want probably more of, and you think you're influential. And the last one that he said is lots of sleep, which I never have. And anyway, he talks about these 5 powers, wealth, fame, sex, fancy food, and lots of sleep, as actually cravings, what the Buddhists would call cravings, not the real powers that you started to list. And he says, all the power you possess, no matter how great, is useless if it doesn't bring you joy, if it doesn't bring you peace, if it doesn't bring happiness to you and those you love. How can we make the claim to be powerful when we are not free from the oppression of our anger, the scourge of our fear, when we are not in control of our thoughts? We are actually quite powerless, even if we have money and fame. Nothing more than slaves to our fears and our emotions and our cravings. When this happens, it is not we who possess power, but power that possesses us. Instead of these cravings in the Art of Power, Thich Nhat Hanh talks about 5 spiritual powers. Those are faith, diligence, mindfulness, concentration, and insight. Anyone with a clear and caring mind is inherently powerful, no matter how little power she appears to possess. Everyone without exception at their core being has the deepest intention of love and goodness. And with these 5 powers can find real happiness. He goes on to say that these 5 powers are based on concrete practices, and you'll have to read the book to find out what those practices are. But he also says this: all of the first 4 powers lead to the 5th superpower of insight. With insight comes a tremendous source of happiness. And who doesn't want to be happy? So I'm going to take us into a meditation. So get yourself comfortable, relax a little bit. I'm going to be singing a song that'll take us in and out of the meditation. And use this time to look at reality and use your 5 powers of faith and diligence, mindfulness, concentration, to get these superpowers, to get insight. It takes time. Thich Nhat Hanh says, you will have breakthroughs that will liberate you from your suffering and your difficulties. We have the power to express our compassion and determination. We have the power to heal the world. One by one, 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 everyone comes to remember. One by one, everyone comes to remember. One by one, everyone comes to remember. Healing the world, we're healing the world, we're healing the world, one step at a time, one step at a time, one step at a time, one step at a time. I am, I am one. I am one. I am one.